Hi everyone! I'm going to take you step by step to create this super cute shrug. This is beginner friendly, but you do need to know how to create a slip knot and chains. This is going to be a beginner-friendly tutorial, but you do need to know how to do a chain and how to make a slip knot. I'm using Hobby's Halloween Universe XL. It's really pretty for this project and it has some sparkles in it. So my yarn is a 3 light. For this project, you can use any type of yarn and any yarn weight that you would like. Additionally, I'm using a worsted weight yarn for this project. I use this for the ribbons for the sleeves and for a border around the neckline. For hooks for this project, I'm using a 4.0 and a 5.0 mm. You want to begin by getting your shoulder to shoulder measurement. So just take a measuring tape and take it from the very end of your shoulder to the other end of your shoulder. My shoulder to shoulder is 16 inches. And then I'm going to add an inch to my project so that my top fits a little more loosely. So I'm going to aim to make a chain that is 17 inches. So just add an inch or two depending on the size that you want. So we're just going to begin by making those chains. And by the end of this, you just want to have an even number of chains. Now, I'm going to go ahead and chain mine until I reach 17 inches. I also just want to give a tip that try to do your foundation chain loose because we are going to be working into the back bumps. So you don't want it to be too tight. If you need to, you can always size up for your foundation chain and then size down when we go to start our work if you have a really tight tension. And just another tip, when I'm keeping track of my chains, I just put a stitch mark every 10 chains. That way I can really quickly count how many chains I have by the end. Okay, I am done with my chains. I did 70. Now to measure your chain, you're just gonna take your measuring tape and I'm starting down at this end. And then I'm just kind of grabbing the tape and the chain and I'm going down to this end. I'm not stretching my chain too much. It looks like my chain is maybe like just 2 chains over 17. It's really close, but I am gonna undo 2 chains on mine. After you're done chaining your desired length, make sure that your chains are an even number, and then we are going to stitch mark the second chain from the hook. And I'm just going to leave this stitch marker here for a while, and then we'll revisit it later. Now we are going to chain an additional 4. And again, we're going to place a stitch marker on the second chain from the hook. This chain 4 counts as our first double crochet plus a chain 1. So we are just stitch marking the top of our first double crochet so that you know where it is. Okay, as we look at our foundation chain here, we have the front of our chain with the 2 loops, and if you turn it around, this is the back of our chain, and these are called the back bumps right here. These are going to be the stitches that we're going to work into, and it just gives us a cleaner bottom down here. And eventually, I think I'm going to add a border to this project. That will make that easier as well. So work in every back bump of the foundation chain. I'm going to show you the repeating pattern that we're going to be doing through most of this project because we are creating a mesh stitch. So we already have our first double crochet and a chain 1. You're going to add a loop to your hook because we're about to make a double crochet, and then turning our project over so that we can see our back bumps. we're going to place a double crochet into that first stitch marker that we placed. So insert into the back bump. And then to make a double crochet, we yarn over, pull up 3 loops, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, yarn over, pull through 2 loops. So that is how it looks. And like I said, you can see right here, this is our first double crochet, and then we have a chain 1 and then our second double crochet. And I'm just going to leave this bottom stitch marker here because I want it to be there later. So the pattern is going to be chain 1, and we are going to skip a stitch and then yarn over. We're going to place a double crochet in the next stitch into the back bump, yarn over, pull up 3 loops, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, yarn over, pull through 2 loops. So that is what the mesh stitch looks like. And we're simply just going to repeat this entire thing down the rest of the chain. Chain 1, skip a stitch, put a double crochet in the next stitch, and that's it. That's going to be what you are repeating for most of this project, but go ahead and work the mesh stitch all the way until your last stitch on your chain. Here is how my row 1 looks. Now as we begin row 2, this is going to be what we're going to repeat for the rest of the front panel, and you just want to do as many rows equal to whatever length you want in the front. For my front panel, I'm going to aim for it to be about 4.5 inches long. And for this project, I am going to be doing a shorter front panel and a little bit of a longer back panel. If you want both of your panels to be the same length, you can definitely do that. But let's go ahead and continue our front panel now, and I'm just going to show you how to start your rows. To start each row, and this will be the same on both sides, you're going to chain 4, and just like we did at the very beginning, this is going to count as a double crochet and a chain 1. If you are a beginner, you may want to put a stitch marker in the second chain from the hook, just to mark the top of your first double crochet so that you know where it is. And then you're going to turn your work, and we're going to continue our repeating pattern, but this time, so we skip a stitch right here, we're going to skip the chain, and then we're going to place a double crochet on top of the previous double crochet. So just place a double crochet right there. So then chain 1, and we are going to skip a stitch and then make a double crochet in the next stitch. Chain 1, skip a stitch, place a double crochet into the next stitch. Your double crochets should be stacked on top of your previous ones, so this is what it looks like. So you're just going to continue to repeat your mesh stitch pattern for the entire row. And then again, when you get down here, you're going to do the same exact thing. Chain 4, turn your work, and continue your mesh stitch pattern. So go ahead and do that for your desired length of your front panel. And like I said, for mine, I'm aiming for 4.5 inches in my total front panel's length. And I will see you when I am done. Okay, my front panel is done, and here is how it is looking. Mine is measuring about 4.5 inches. It's maybe just a tiny bit over, but I'm happy with that. Now that you're done with your front panel, you want to place it on top of yourself, and you want to put it kind of under your neck. And you're going to I like to look for the straps that I am already wearing on my shirt. And I kind of go from there. And what you'll do is place a stitch marker on each side. And that's going to mark where our shoulders are. and the space in between is how big your neck hole is going to be. So if you want a looser fit, do less. And if you want a tighter neckline, then you will put your stitch markers in more. For my stitch markers, it's about 4 inches in. The space for my neckline is about 9 inches. And just for size reference, I usually wear like a medium and sometimes a small. So after you mark your sides, you just want to check the math. I like to count how many mesh stitches I have. I have 8 on mine, so I count each mesh stitch, and then I just mark the double crochet on top. So I have 8 mesh stitches here, and I have my stitch marker right here. And you'll do the same exact thing on the other side. Make sure you count over how many mesh stitches you have, and then mark your stitch marker so that it's in the same exact spot. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to take your piece here and count how many stitches are in between each of your stitch markers. And I do not count the stitch markers, only count the stitches in between. So for me, I have 35 stitches in between, and then write that number down. So we're going to continue where we left off. The nice part about this pattern is the front and the back panel, we're all going to be connecting and doing that as one piece. So if your sizing is really off, at least you can undo and go back and fix it. Okay, we're going to begin our row in the same exact way that we have been, where we chain 4. So just repeat the pattern that we have been doing, making your mesh stitch, and just put your last double crochet into your stitch marker, and then I will tell you what to do from there. Okay, I just placed my last double crochet in my stitch marker spot right here. Now we're just going to chain, and we're going to chain an equal amount to how many stitches we counted. So for me, that was 35 stitches right here. So I'm going to chain 35. Now you don't have to do this, but on the next round, we are going to be working into the back bumps. So I do like to mark this just so I can tell, because it can look a little bit confusing back here. So I'm going to turn my stitches around, and on the second chain that I made, I'm just going to mark that back bump with a stitch marker. After you're done chaining, I am again going to mark the back bump in the second chain from the hook. So right here. When you're done creating that chain, you're just going to now go into the other side, and you're just going to place a double crochet into the spot where your other stitch marker is. Just like that. So this is what mine looks like. And now we're just going to do our normal mesh stitch in the rest of the stitches that we have remaining on this row. Okay, once you get to the end, just place a stitch marker on your working yarn so that you don't lose your spot. And then I like to try this on and make sure that you like this fit. Otherwise, you will want to make some adjustments here. Okay, so I actually did go back and I undid mine because it was my neckline was a little too tight. So I did undo just one mesh stitch basically. So I have 7 mesh stitches now, and it measures, my stitch marker is about 3.5 inches in. My neckline is now about 10 inches. And I'll insert some footage here of how that looks while it's on, and you can kind of see how it's fitting me. Like I said, I wanted mine to be a little bit of a looser fit, but also remember to try to keep in mind that like the shoulders and everything are gonna kind of pull on the top. So you may wanna kind of stretch it out and make sure it's in a good spot. It's also not a bad idea as you're doing a few rows of the back panel to keep trying this on and just making sure you're liking how everything is fitting. I'm going to show you how to do the first row of the back panel. We're going to do the same thing that we've done on the rest of the rows. So begin with chaining 4. And then just continue to do your normal mesh stitches up until here, and then I'll show you what to do. I just put my last stitch into where the previous double crochet was. I'm going to continue to make mesh stitch along the chain. Just like we did in the foundation chain, I am going to work into the back bumps. This does twist the chain just a little bit right here, but you're not going to be able to tell, and it'll give you a cleaner edge. So if you marked your second chain's back bump like I did, then you'll know exactly where to insert. If you didn't, just kind of look at your chain here. You can see there's my first back bump right there, and here's my second one that I have marked. So we're gonna begin in that one, and we're just continuing our mesh stitch. So it's the same exact thing that you've been doing. So you're gonna chain one after that last double crochet we put in, and then you're going to insert a double crochet into the back bump on the chain, and we're making sure to skip a stitch, which is why we're starting in the second chain. And you can remove your stitch marker after that. Just continue now to work down your chain, and we're just doing exactly the same thing that we've been doing, and you're working this chain the same way you did the foundation chain. And I will see you when I get to the other end of the chain. All right, I'm now at the other end of the chain, and if you counted correctly, you should have one stitch left, and then the one where we put the stitch marker, we're gonna put our double crochet into that. So then I'm going to chain one, and then we're skipping that chain right there and working on top of the double crochet that we made on the shoulder area. And this is how mine looks. And now you're just going to continue doing your mesh stitch until you reach the end of the row. And then after that, you'll see that it looks just like it did down here when we were working on the front panel. Now we are going to just keep doing the same exact thing, keep working your rows. And like I said in the beginning, you can either make this the same length as your front panel, or if you want to do it the way I am, I'm going to make my back panel a little bit longer than my front panel. So my front panel measured 4.5 inches in length. I'm probably going to make the back panel about 7 inches in length. So go ahead and do whatever you would like. It's not going to affect the pattern. It'll still be the same. The only thing I do want to say is if you do have this pretty short on your front panel and you make your back panel the same length, just make sure that you fold this in half and check the opening here. Like try on your top and make sure that bring both panels together. And you just want to make sure that you have a big enough space for your arm. If it's a little tight, that's okay because we can increase it, but just make sure that you have enough space and it's not too small. If it is too small, you may want to continue to add more rows in the back panel. But I will show you that when I get to that point and you can see what I mean. My back panel is complete. My back panel is measuring at about 7.5 inches. I ended up doing a little bit extra because I just wanted it a little bit longer. I think I had said I was going to do 7 previously, but 7.5 felt good for me. And then we are about to talk about the arm opening here, but just to give reference while I have my camera up here, my arm opening is about 5 inches. Okay, I've got all sorts of stitch markers going on here, but let me take you through the chaos. What we're gonna do is we wanna figure out how big we want our arm opening to be. So first I want you to take a stitch marker and attach the bottom of the front panel and the bottom of the back panel and the bottom of the front panel. I want you to connect the bottom stitches together on both sides. And then you're gonna try this on, and you may want to have a couple of stitches like mine together on the side, because if I left this without this stitch marker here, the arm opening would be too big for me. Depending on how long you made your back panel and everything, you may not want to stitch up anything on the side, and that's totally fine. So just in that case, just leave the bottoms together. When you're doing your side, you want to line up your mesh stitches on each side of the front and back panel. So starting from the bottom of the front panel, I'm connecting 2 mesh stitch together. Yeah, I just realized mine is off. So actually I have it up 3 mesh stitches on the back panel, but on the front panel I only have 2. So I'm just gonna disconnect this real quick. And I'm gonna connect to the 3rd stitch. So I have 3 mesh stitches on the front, and then I'm just connecting them through like the side bar right here. And then I have 3 mesh stitches on the back. So I'm gonna try this on again. Make sure that you really like this fit, and I will be back. So I made some adjustments with mine. So now my arm opening is about 6 inches. I wanted it to be a looser fit, so I'm really happy with that now. If you look at the side of my top now, I only have 2 mesh stitches connected together on the side. So find what you like and how big of an arm opening that you would like to have on your top, and then connect them together with the stitch marker. Okay, so over here where we left off, we're gonna keep our yarn connected. We are not fastening off yet. We're basically gonna keep this yarn connected, and then we're gonna sew up the side if you need to. If you don't have to worry about that. Okay, so I'm placing my hook back into where I left off, and I took the stitch markers out from these right here, but I left this one in for now. We are gonna chain 1, and then I'm going to, if you're on the other side, I don't think you'll have to do this, but since I'm on this side, I'm gonna have to turn so that I am working this way. We are going to be slit stitching these stitches together, and we're gonna line them up the best that we can. And it's a little bit awkward to work into. There's not really a great specific spot, so just try your best to line them up like this so that the mesh stitches are lined up. And then I'm gonna take my hook and go through the first stitch on this side, and then I'm going to grab the first stitch on the other side, and I'm going to slit stitch by yarning over and pulling through both loops, just like that. And now I'm going to be going into the chain, so I'm going to grab a random chain, and then I'm going to grab a random chain on the other side and create my slit stitch. Now we have these 2 bars here, and we want to line those up. Insert the hook through here, and then insert it through the other side, and slit stitch. Now we have our, well, for me, the last chain spot. So I'm going to insert through that, and insert through the other side, slit stitch. And now I'm at the last 2 bars, so I'm going to remove my stitch marker, and then going through this vertical bar here, and then through the one on the other side, and slit stitch. Now our sides are connected together. And if you're not sewing up, you'll just simply connect the first 2, and then you'll stop there. And now I'll show you what to do next, because now we're going to start the armhole. Now that our seam is finished, by the way, this will end up being the inside because we don't want this seam to be on the outside. Once we're done with everything, we will turn this around because it looks a lot nicer on this side. We're going to begin our arm, and row 1 is a little bit tricky because we want to still line up our stitches with these here so that all of the bars are lined up. So we're going to end up working into the sides of these stitches. The seam is a bit awkward because the way that it connects together here, we kind of want another bar coming up here. It's a little bit hard to explain. but look at your seam here, and then to the left of mine, I have a bar right here. I'm going to place a stitch marker at the top of that bar just to indicate to myself that I want to put one last stitch right there, but it is going to be really close to the first mesh stitch that we make, so it's going to look a little bit strange. I will explain it as we go though. So go ahead and mark that one there. So here's my seam, and it's this bar here, right beside where the seam is at the top. We are also going to begin working in the round now instead of working in rows. Let's begin the same way we have been doing our mesh stitch pattern the entire time by chaining 4. If you'd like, you can mark that second chain from the hook because that is our first double crochet. Okay, so I'm not going to go into this here because that's basically what this one is connecting to. So looking at my stitches here, I'm going to skip this chain space here. That's going to basically be our stitch that we had been skipping. And then we're going to insert our first double crochet on top of this double crochet right here. If you don't get this in the exact right spot, don't worry, it really shouldn't make too much of a difference. Now we are going to chain 1. And again, we're going to skip the chain that's right here. And then we're going to create a double crochet right on top of our other double crochet. Chain 1, skip that chain, and put a double crochet on top of our other double crochet. So let's repeat this all the way around, and then I will show you how to end it. Right, I'm coming back to the beginning now. So I'm going to place another double crochet in here. And here's my stitch marker, so I know that's going to be where my last double crochet is going to go. Now I'm going to chain 1. And we are going to slip stitch to that first double crochet where our stitch marker is. That is the top of the chain 3. Well, it was a chain 4, but it's at the 3rd chain. So go ahead and insert a slit stitch. Okay, so all of those should be lined up now. And now the rest of the sleeve will be just like it was when we were doing the rows, where we'll see the actual chain 1 and then the double crochet. Okay, my round 2 probably looks a little bit different now because I'm actually on my 2nd sleeve. And so don't mind this looking a little bit different. So for my sleeve, I am doing the mesh stitch for 18 rounds in total. So this was the first round here. So round 1 to round 18, I do a mesh stitch. And this may be different for you depending on the length of your arm. You want to keep trying on your top and just seeing what you like. I'm personally not going to be increasing at all because I'm happy with the opening of my arm. If you do need to increase, if this is really tight though, I will show you how to do that. But first of all, let's just talk about how you do the rest of your rounds. So it's pretty much what we have done the whole pattern. So before we were working in rows, so it's just a little bit different. You're going to start your rounds by chaining 4. And again, we mark the 2nd chain from the hook because it counts as our first double crochet. And now you just make a mesh stitch all the way around. And it's exactly how it was when we were working in rows. So you'll chain 1, you'll skip a stitch, and then you will place a double crochet on top of your previous double crochet. Just like that. And then I will show you how to close the round. But before I do that, I do just want to explain how to increase in case you need to do that. And there's a really simple way to do your increasing if you're doing this mesh stitch. All you'll do, instead of chaining 1, you will chain 2. And then you will place your next double crochet in the same exact spot. So you're still skipping 1 stitch and you're still placing your double crochet on top of your previous one. The only difference is between each one, you're just going to increase how many chains you're doing. So on this round, if I was increasing, I'm doing 2 chains. And that's going to slowly just make this wider and wider. Now, it's up to you how dramatic of an increase you want. So if you want it to be a pretty big increase, then maybe increase every stitch. If you want a little bit less, maybe increase every other stitch. Or just do a few stitches, place an increase, do a few more stitches, place an increase. It just depends on how dramatic or subtle you want your increase to be. Or you could also just like start to increase on the first stitch each round if you want it to be really subtle and just like slowly increasing. Now, when you get to the next round, if you want to increase again and you want to continue to increase where you had your previous increase, instead of doing 2 chains, you're just going to do 3 chains. And you will just keep increasing the number of chains between this stitch as your rounds go on. So if I was doing an increase on the next round, I would do a chain of 3 in between here. If I did another round, I would do a chain of 4, and then another round would be a chain of 5, and so on. So hopefully that makes sense. If you have any questions, just leave a comment and I will try my best to help you out. But as I said, I'm not doing any increasing on mine. So I am going to undo this and I'm just normally going to do the mesh stitch all the way around, and that will end at round 18. I have finished doing my rows of the mesh stitch on my sleeve, and now I'm going to do a little bit something different for the rest of it. And right now the sleeve is a little bit past my elbow. If you'd like, you can continue to do the mesh stitch for the entire sleeve. You don't have to do that. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to make double crochets around in every stitch. I'm not going to be doing a chain or anything like that. So to start the row, you chain 3. This is the top of our double crochet. This counts as our first stitch. For this round, when I am at one of the spaces, I'm just going to place my double crochet in that space. Just like that. And then I'm going to place a double crochet where we have been in the usual spot on top of the last double crochet. And then just in the space. And then on top of the last double crochet, just like that. And that is all you do all the way around. And then when you get to the next round, you're just going to double crochet in every stitch. And I'm just chaining 3 at the beginning of each round. That counts as our first stitch. And then when we get back around, we're closing our rounds in the same way. So you're going to slip stitch to this first double crochet. And I'm not turning my rounds or anything. I'm just working around and around, just like we have been, but I'm doing just double crochet instead of a mesh stitch. So I personally do 14 rows of the double crochet. So just go ahead and do that until you reach your desired length. I've reached the last round of my sleeve, so I'm going to show you how I like to end it. If you'd like, you can just slip stitch to the first double crochet, chain 1, and fasten off. But I'm going to show you how to do an invisible join. I just think it looks a lot neater. So lift up your hook and then cut your yarn and then just pull it through. So here is my first stitch. I'm going to remove this stitch marker. And this is my second stitch. We are basically going to be making a fake stitch on top of the first one, and that will cover this and it will look really seamless. So just insert your needle going away from you in the second stitch, pull it through, And then kind of try to make it equal to how your other stitches look in length. And then if we look at our last stitch here, there is 2 loops. This is the back loop right here. We're going to be inserting just through the back loop. So take your needle through the back loop, and then also I like to grab this other loop on the back as well, and then pull your needle through. And then I kind of adjust this, especially with this yarn. I just want to make this look like a stitch here. If yours got a little bit tangled up like mine did, just gonna do that. There you go. It looks really nice and seamless. And then keep in mind that this is actually the outside of our work, and this is the right side, the side that we will see. So when we weave in our ends, make sure you keep that in mind and pay attention to which side you are on, because if you remember when we seamed up the sides of the shirt, we had the slit stitch on the inside, the wrong side. So we're working on the wrong side right now, and we want to make sure that that seam is hidden. If you want, you can leave this as the right side, that's totally fine, but I personally like to put the seam on the inside. So I'm going to turn this inside out. So when I'm weaving in my end, I'm going to actually weave it in through this side that's facing me right now. And to weave in your end, you are just going to take your needle. I'm going to kind of go down through one of the stitches right here. I just like to take it down a row and pull gently. You don't want to pull too tight, because that will mess up your seam right here. I am going to create a knot. I like to just do this to secure it. So to do that, grab a nearby loop, pull your needle through slowly, and you're gonna see this loop start to form. Grab that loop, and then pull your needle through the loop. And then tighten it to secure your yarn with a little knot. Now I'm just going to take it through some of the double crochets back here. You can take it anywhere you want, it doesn't matter, but make sure you take it through a few stitches. And then it really helps to go back in a different direction. So I'm gonna go back in the same spot I just came through. And then I'm not pulling too tightly because I don't want to mess up the seam. And you can weave this through as many times as you would like. I am going to go to a different spot and just secure it just a little bit more through a few random stitches. Okay, so now I'm going to cut my yarn. And now before you take your shirt and turn it to the right side, just go ahead and weave in any of your remaining ends. Now it is time for us to move to the other side. So I'm just going to quickly show you how I do that, because it is pretty much what we did on the other side. The only difference is now we are connecting our yarn. So go ahead and make a slip knot. To connect my yarn, I'm going to go through the one side here. And I'm going to put my slip knot on my hook. And then just pull that through and chain one. And I'm just going to move the tail out of the way for now. Okay, so now we're just going to do exactly what we did on the other side. So I'm going to insert through the stitch and then insert through the other side. And then I'm going to slit stitch. And in the chain, I'm just inserting into a random spot of the chain and creating my slit stitch. you're just really trying to just line these up and just find similar spots on each side. Now I'm at my stitch marker. I'm going to go ahead and remove this. This is the last spot that I'm inserting mine into. Okay, just like I did last time, I'm going to pull the stitches apart here, and I'm looking for this vertical bar right here. I'm going to put a stitch marker right there, just like that. And that's going to mark where I'm putting my last stitch. So if we look at this here, you'll see there's kind of like a vertical bar right here. That's technically where my first one is going to be when we do the chain. And then we'll be working around this way. And so then this will be my last one. I hope that makes sense. I know it's a little confusing, but it doesn't have to be perfect. Just try your best. And make sure you just try to, at the very end of this, I would count your stitches and just make sure that you write that number down, because you want your arms to have the same number of stitches. Yeah, there's not really like a perfect way to do it when you're working into the sides of these stitches. That's why it is a little bit hard to explain. So just like the other side, I will just do a quick recap. We are just going to chain 4, and I'm going to mark the second chain from my hook. That is my first double crochet. And now we're just going to make our mesh stitch around, and this is always the awkward round because we're working into the sides. But just as a reminder, so if I'm looking at this here, here's the side of my chain. This is going to be what we skip. And then this is the top of the double crochet. So just look for these vertical lines, and that's the top of where your double crochet is going to go. So we already have our chain 1, but that's why we chained 4. We're skipping this space right here, and we're placing our double crochet in the top of our other double crochet. So then chain 1, skip this space right here, and the top of your double crochet is going right here. Chain 1, skip the space, place your double crochet on top of that other line. So it should start to look like this. It basically looks like this mesh stitch is just continuing on. So go ahead and repeat this all the way around. Once I have reached my stitch marker, this is where my last stitch is going to go. And then when you get to the end of a round, you will chain 1. And to close the round, we are going to split stitch to our first double crochet, which is that chain 3. I'm going to go around and count my mesh stitches and make sure that they line up with my other arm. On my other arm, I had 22 mesh stitches, so I want to make sure I also have 22 on this arm. And when you look at your first mesh stitch, it does kind of look like this because it is kind of close together here. So don't forget to count that one too. So I do have 22, so I am good. Now you will go ahead and complete your sleeve. You're going to do exactly what you did on your other sleeve. Now we're going to make our ribbons that go around the arms, and I am using a worsted weight yarn for that. You can of course use any yarn weight that you would like for these. I'm going to be creating what's called a half I-cord, and I'm going to be using 2 ends of my skein of yarn here. If you'd like, you can also just do a regular chain for your ribbon. To make that half I-cord, take both of your ends together, and we're going to make a slip knot with both ends. I don't really leave a long tail because we're just going to be cutting this off at the end. and then tighten both of them. Now choose one of your pieces of yarn to be the one that you're going to hold, just like you would regularly hold your yarn. And then this piece of yarn is going to be an extra piece of yarn that we are just going to yarn over with. So this is a lot like just making a chain. This is also referred to as a double chain as well. It's really simple. All you do is just add one extra step to your chaining. So we're just gonna add an extra loop with the one that we're not holding. So just bring that over your hook like that, and then yarn over and pull through, making a chain just like you normally would. So we're just adding a loop to our hook and then making a chain. Add a loop and chain. And that is how you make a half I cord. I'm gonna go ahead and keep doing this until I reach my desired length. I am finished with the length of my ribbon, and what I like to do is fold it in half, and then I take my measuring tape and I just hold it like this. I'm not stretching too much, I'm just grabbing like this. And so mine is 7.5 inches. I just do this so that I don't have to count my chains, and I can generally make my ribbons about the same length. When you're done with your half I cord, just take both ends of the yarn and just make a chain with both of them. And then we can pull up and cut this off. And again, I don't need to leave a lot because I'm just going to tie a knot, and then I'm going to be cutting this. So go ahead and tie a knot. I usually like to make a double knot just in case. I also tie an additional knot at the other end. Now I'm not going to cut these off just yet because I am going to use them to help me pull this through the sleeve. You don't have to do this, but I do like to try on the top, and I basically decide, okay, I want the ribbon to come out like right here, and then I mark these 2 points beside it. I'm just taking 2 of the stitches and placing them together. Oh, by the way, I am also placing my ribbon on this round that is our last mesh stitch round. If you want, you can place yours here or wherever you want to put your ribbon, but that is where I'm putting mine. So I'm going to take one of my ends and I'm pulling it out like this where I want it to tie. And then I'm going to take my other end. I personally like to use a darning needle, but you don't have to. You could just use your hands. Okay, now I'm going to take my end and I'm going to be going around this way. You can go whichever direction you want first. Right now, this is under 2 double crochets, and then I'm going to go over 2 double crochets, or technically 1 mesh stitch. And then I'm bringing it back out, and I'm just going to be alternating, going under and over. And then when I get back to the beginning here, I'm just gonna pull this out to come out where the other end is. Obviously, I need to even the ends out, so I am gonna pull this end. And you're just gonna have to keep sort of adjusting this until your ends are relatively the same length. I'm just going to remove these stitch markers now. Now I'm going to tie my bow. Now I'm going to cut off my ends, so I'm just going to get it very close to the knot that we made. But I'm making sure to leave just a tiny, tiny bit so the knot doesn't come undone. I am all done adding my bows to the sleeve, and now we will move on to the next part. Now I'm going to put a border around the bottom of my top. So the top of the shrug right now is closer to me and the bottom is down here. I made a slip knot with the color that I want to make my border, and I'm going to attach it here. I'm personally going to start my attaching on the seam on one of the sides, just because it's already kind of messy there anyways, so I'd rather have the seam be there. So right here where my seam is attached, I'm going to insert my hook, and I am pulling the slip knot through. I'm also grabbing the tail end from the seam that we sewed together here because I'm going to hide it through the border. Once you attach, go ahead and chain one. At first, I'm just going to make a single crochet border around the bottom. In the first stitch here, I'm going to be inserting a single crochet. So for mine, I'm going to yarn under, pull up 2 loops, and then yarn over. But you can do any single crochet combination you would like. I'm going to mark my first single crochet with a stitch marker. My next stitch is a chain spot, and typically I am going to work into those stitches instead of in between. But this one is really tight because it's right near the seam here. So for this one, I'm just going to go in between. But for the rest of them, I'm going to go into the stitches. So in the next stitch, I'm going to place a single crochet, and I am hiding my yarn as I go. So the next stitch is a chain. I'm going to insert into that chain and place my single crochet, and then into the next stitch, place a single crochet. So this is how it is looking, and I'm just going to continue to make a single crochet around and around in every stitch on the bottom until I get back around here. Okay, so I actually switched doing my border to the same yarn, but it's still the same thing. And I just wanted to show you what happens when you get to the other seam. So basically, I'm just going to treat this as one bar right here. I'm sorry, I know it's hard to see because there's so much shirt here, but so this right here, this seam, we're going to count that as one bar. I'm just going to kind of insert really anywhere I can at the end of that bar, wherever I can get my hook into, and place my single crochet in there. And then I'm over at this other end now, so I am going to end up hiding this one too. This chain is, again, just like the other side, going to be a little bit difficult to insert into, so I'm just going to put the single crochet through the middle of the mesh stitch and create my single crochet. And now, continuing on top of this double crochet here, I will work into each stitch just like I did on the back, because I am now on the front. So I'm inserting into the next stitch, and I'm bringing my yarn with me. And now I'm just continuing on making the single crochets around. So that is how you handle the seam, and then I will see you when we get back around. I am now back around to the beginning of the border. I just inserted into my last chain. This spot right here is again where the seam kind of becomes one. So I'm not gonna be putting a single crochet right there. So let's slip stitch to the first single crochet to close our round. I'm going to do an invisible seam to close my round because I am going to be switching colors here for the next part. If you're not switching colors, then you can just slip stitch to the first single crochet to close your round. I cut my yarn and I'm going to bring it through, and I'm going to do just what I did on the sleeve. You skip the first stitch, and then you're going to insert in the second stitch, going away from you, pull the yarn through. And now we're going to go through the back loop, and I'm also going to try to grab some other loops to secure it more. piece like this, and I'm going to bring it through. And then I'm just going to adjust it so that it is the same length as my other pieces. And I am going to put a stitch marker on this because I'm going to be reinserting my yarn in the same spots. I'm just going to secure this back piece just through a few pieces of yarn. I'm going to bring it over towards where we're going to start the next round. That way I can just hide it in that yarn. And I am going to make a little knot again by grabbing a close by piece, pulling through, and then grab that loop, and then reinsert your hook and pull it to create a knot. So when I go to attach my new color, I'm just going to hide it under that. Now we're going to start our ribbing, and this is going to go all the way around the bottom of the top. And I will say that this is a long process. This is a lot of ribbing to do. I just personally love ribbing and I love how it looks, but I can totally understand if you don't want to do all of this ribbing. So you could just do the single crochet border and leave it at that. When I begin my example, I do use this yarn, but this ended up being way too thick. This is a worsted weight 4, and this yarn is a light 3. So it really ended up making the bottom of my top flare out since this was too big. So I did end up just sticking with the same yarn that I've been using for the bottom ribbing. And I used a 4-point hook for my ribbing as well. Also in the example, since this was a thicker yarn, I ended up chaining 4 in the first row, but since I've changed to this, I ended up chaining 5, so I did 1 extra chain. I'm going to be creating a ribbing at the bottom of my shrug, and I am going to be using the same color that I used on my ribbon just to kind of pull the design together more. So put a slip knot on the new yarn if you are connecting a new color. Now on this round, we are going to be working into the back loops of each stitch. So just as a reminder, here's your stitch here. This right here is the front loop. And this back here is the back loop. And that's the one that we are going to be working into. So in my first stitch, I'm going to be inserting my slip knot, but just into the back loop. So pull the new color through, and now go ahead and chain 1. And this chain 1 is going to count as our first chain. And for my ribbing, I'm going to be making it 3 chains high. So I am going to chain 4 because I do want 1 turning chain. If you didn't connect a new color, make sure you also chain 4. And then I want you to place a stitch mark on your first stitch. And then place another one on the second chain from your hook. And you can do your ribbing as high or low as you would like. So you can do less or more chains than I am. And it's all going to be the same. So just put a stitch marker on your second chain from your hook and on your first chain. I'm going to be creating a slip stitch ribbing, so I will show you how to do that. We're going to be working into the back bumps on this first row. So starting from the second chain from the hook, I'm going to insert a slip stitch into the back bump and keep your tension really loose. This is so much easier to do if you have a loose tension. If you have a really tight tension and you are having trouble with the ribbing, then you may want to size your hook up. I am just continuing to use the same hook for mine. So in the next back bump, I'm going to insert another slip stitch. And then in the last chain, I'm inserting my last slip stitch into the back bump. Okay, so now I'm gonna take this tail end with me if you have a tail end. That way I can hide it through this. So now in the next stitch, we are going to insert a slip stitch, and I'm going to be working into the back loop only. And I'm hiding my yarn, so I'm bringing my yarn over with me, and then I'm just going to slip stitch just like that. Now I'm going to chain 1 and I'm going to turn my work. And this is where our repeating pattern begins. We're just going to be doing the same exact thing all the way around. So here's where it's really important that you pay attention to what's going on with your work here. So here's our chain 1 that we made. And then under that is going to be the slit stitch that we made to the stitch. So make sure you skip both of those and you don't work into them. On every row, we're going to be working into the back loop. So right here. So I have 3 stitches, so I should be making 3 slit stitches. So make sure you're counting while you're getting used to how this looks. Make sure you're counting and you have the right number. So create a slit stitch in the back loop and then go into the next back loop and make a slit stitch. And then in the last back loop, place a slit stitch. Now I'm going to chain 1 and I'm going to turn my work again. And we're just doing the same exact thing. So make sure you skip your chain 1 and then we're still working into the back loops right here. Place your slit stitch. Into the next back loop, that's 2, and then into the next back loop, that's 3. And again, I'm still hiding my yarn while I do all this, so now I'm going to slit stitch to the next stitch into the back loop, and I'm hiding my yarn as I go. And now it just starts all over again. So chain 1, turn your work, skip the chain 1, skip that slit stitch that we made to the stitch, and then begin making your slit stitches in the back loop. Chain 1 and turn your work. Skip the chain 1 and then create your slit stitches in the back loop. And then slit stitch to the back loop of the next stitch. And there we go. That is what we are going to be repeating all the way around. So then I will meet you back around at the beginning. So when I'm at the end of my ribbing here, I went into my last stitch, and then you want to do one more row going up because you want to end on the top. So after you end this row, you are going to chain 1. And now we're just going to slit stitch the ribbing together. So I'm going to fold these together like this, and you want to fold it in a way to where this is the wrong side right here. This is the right side because we want to be sewing on the wrong side. So after that, I'm going to turn this, and now I'm just going to be connecting all of the stitches on the top of here and here together. Oh, another thing I forgot to mention is I did end up doing, when I switched to this yarn, I ended up chaining 5 at the very beginning and doing 4 slit stitches because this yarn is a lot smaller than the yarn that I was using before. So if I turn these to the side here, we have our last and our first stitch with our stitch markers there. And then we have the ones in between. These are what we're going to be slit stitching through both loops right here. And on the row that we left off on, you will have the same exact thing. You will see 2 loops. Those are the 2 loops that you're going to go through. If you really need to, you can attach your stitches together with the stitch markers to line them up. So I'm going into the first stitch on row 1. And then I'm going in through our last row's loops. And then yarn over and do a slit stitch. Now I'm going into the next stitch. and I'm grabbing the corresponding stitch on the other side and doing a slip stitch. And we're just going to repeat this in each stitch going down. So for mine, it will be 4 stitches. Here's my last stitch on the side. Now you can go ahead and remove these stitch markers. Okay, on the outside, it's going to look like this. Once you're done, you can just chain 1 and fasten off. Just pull this through. And then you will just hide this end through your stitches here. And there we go, our ribbing is all done. For this next part, this is something that you don't need to do. I just personally prefer to do it. I am going to do a little border just around the neck. And I am going to try using the worsted weight yarn because I want to see how that looks. There is a chance that I will end up switching to the yarn that I've been using here. I'm going to use a 4.0 mm hook. Begin by placing a slip knot on your yarn. And then I'm just going to start mine anywhere in the back. It doesn't really matter where. Insert your hook and bring the yarn through and then chain 1. Now I'm going to insert a single crochet into that same stitch. And I am also going to carry the tail with me so I can hide it. You can go ahead and mark the first single crochet if you want. And I'm just going to create a single crochet around in every stitch. And so when I get to the chain here, I'm also just going to insert into that chain and then place my single crochet in there. This is pretty much what we did around the border on the bottom when we did the single crochet around. So just like that. And you're going to do that in every stitch. When you get to the side, there is going to be one side stitch from just how we did the sleeves. So when you get to that point, you could just put a single crochet into that stitch right there, or you can just insert into the side of the chain. But just insert one single crochet there, and then the rest of the stitches should be normal. I am back at the beginning now, and I'm going to close my round with a invisible join like I've done on the other ones. And as always, if you'd like, you can just slip stitch to the first single crochet, chain 1, and fasten off. So insert into the second stitch, taking your needle away from you. And then going through the back loop of the last stitch, and I'm grabbing a couple of extra loops and bringing that down. And then tighten that to match the other stitches. As you can see, it looks really seamless. And then on the back here, I am going to insert into a loop that's nearby. And I'm just making a knot to secure this more. And now I'm going to weave in this end through the back here. Our top is all complete. Thank you all so much for following this tutorial. If you decided to make this top, I hope you really enjoy it. I absolutely love the fall colors on this, and I will definitely be wearing this a lot through fall. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please subscribe to my channel and like this video. See you all next time. Bye!